It started with a single interruption inside one of the most tightly guarded rooms in Whitehall, a briefing that was never supposed to stop. Yet moments after a sealed red folder was quietly passed across the cabinet table, Prince William rose without warning, exchanged a frozen glance with senior aides, and walked out. No statement, no explanation, just silence. And within minutes, palace insiders began whispering that a sudden change in royal protocol had triggered something far bigger than a political disagreement. Before we go deeper into what this really means for the royal family, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single update. What made the moment so unsettling was not merely the fact that William left, but the atmosphere that reportedly followed behind him. According to insiders familiar with the briefing, the room itself fell into an almost immediate state of confusion as senior ministers scrambled to understand whether the interruption had been planned or whether something inside the sealed directive had gone catastrophically wrong. Reports suggest the meeting had originally been organized as a high-level security coordination session tied to contingency planning surrounding the monarchy's future stability during King Charles's ongoing health concerns. These kinds of briefings were not unusual. What was unusual, however, was the timing of the protocol amendment that appeared midway through the discussion without prior circulation to several officials present. Sources whisper that even some veteran cabinet figures appeared visibly unsettled when the updated document was introduced, particularly because portions of the amendment allegedly involved revised procedures connected to the Wales household. And that was where the tension inside the room reportedly changed. Various interpretations of the incident describe William quietly reviewing several pages before abruptly closing the folder altogether. One palace administrative source later claimed the Prince of Wales looked less angry than alarmed, as though he had suddenly discovered something he believed should never have reached that stage without his knowledge. Within minutes of his departure, royal aides were allegedly seen making urgent calls back to Kensington Palace, while others attempted to contain the growing panic spreading through both government and royal channels. What exactly had triggered such a reaction remains fiercely protected behind palace walls, but insiders now claim the rewritten directive may have directly impacted Catherine and Wales' children in ways that immediately raised concerns inside William's inner circle. That possibility alone was enough to send shockwaves through royal staff already exhausted by months of quiet instability between Buckingham Palace and Kensington Palace. Reports suggest tensions had been escalating privately for weeks as competing advisors debated how the monarchy should prepare for an uncertain future shaped by illness, succession pressure, and shifting authority behind the scenes. Yet until that briefing, the disagreements had reportedly remained hidden beneath carefully managed public appearances and polished royal messaging. Then suddenly, everything changed. Palace communications teams were allegedly instructed to delay multiple planned announcements later that afternoon, an extraordinarily rare move that only deepened suspicion among journalists and royal correspondents already sensing fractures inside the institution. Some media insiders now claim there had been signs for weeks that something significant was brewing behind closed doors, including unusually restricted staff access, canceled planning sessions, and growing discomfort among senior aides responsible for coordinating future engagements involving Catherine and William. But even those observers reportedly underestimated how explosive the situation had become until the moment William walked out, because according to whispers now circulating through both Whitehall and the palace, the future of the monarchy itself may have collided head-on with an internal power struggle nobody expected to surface so publicly, so suddenly, or so dangerously. But what truly stunned palace insiders was not William's abrupt exit, was the explosive reason hidden inside the rewritten protocol itself. For decades, royal protocol existed like an invisible wall around the monarchy, cold, rigid, unquestioned, but according to whispers now, leaking from both Whitehall and Kensington Palace, one newly revised clause may have crossed a line even Prince William could not tolerate. In the hours following his abrupt departure from the cabinet briefing, an atmosphere of controlled panic reportedly spread through senior royal circles, as officials attempted to prevent details of the amendment from reaching the press. Yet the more tightly insiders tried to contain the story, the more dangerous the speculation became. According to Palace administrative sources, the revised protocol was allegedly tied to emergency succession security procedures, connected to temporary authority structures during periods of royal medical instability. On paper, that language sounded procedural, almost harmless. But insiders familiar with constitutional planning claim The reality behind the amendment was far more explosive because it reportedly touched the one issue that had quietly haunted the monarchy since King Charles's health struggles began. The future balance of power surrounding William, Catherine, and the Wales children. Reports suggest portions of the revised directive may have proposed restructuring how specific responsibilities would temporarily transfer during emergency royal circumstances, particularly in scenarios involving prolonged illness or incapacity at the highest level of the institution. And according to whispers now circulating through both palace and government corridors, Catherine's future constitutional position, allegedly became central to the debate. That alone was enough to trigger alarm inside William's inner circle. Sources close to Kensington Palace claim the Prince of Wales had grown increasingly frustrated in recent months over what allies described as last-minute interference from senior palace figures attempting to reshape long-standing understandings behind closed doors. Various interpretations of the situation suggest William believed certain officials were trying to accelerate sensitive constitutional preparations without full transparency, effectively forcing changes into motion while public attention remained fixed elsewhere. What made the situation even more volatile was the timing. According to several royal correspondents, discussions surrounding succession management had already become extraordinarily delicate due to fears about public confidence in the monarchy during a period of visible uncertainty. Yet instead of calming tensions, the protocol amendment appeared to deepen them dramatically. Cabinet staff were reportedly instructed almost immediately to restrict access to internal briefing documentation connected to the meeting. An unusual move that only intensified suspicion among aides, who had already sensed growing instability between Buckingham Palace and Kensington Palace. One senior source allegedly described the atmosphere afterward as constitutional ice cracking beneath everyone's feet. Royal commentators soon began referencing the situation as an unprecedented constitutional sensitivity, with some quietly drawing comparisons to contingency planning crises that emerged during the later years of Queen Elizabeth II's reign. Those familiar with the monarchy's internal machinery understood why such comparisons carried enormous weight. The late Queen had reportedly spent decades ensuring succession procedures remained stable, disciplined, and carefully insulated from factional influence. To some insiders, the idea that emergency protocols were suddenly being rewritten during another health-related period of uncertainty felt deeply unsettling. And for William's allies, the timing reportedly appeared even more suspicious. Several sources now claim aides close to the prince believed the amendment was introduced deliberately during a moment when institutional pressure and public sympathy surrounding the king's condition made resistance politically difficult. That suspicion reportedly transformed frustration into outright distrust. Behind closed doors, figures who once viewed themselves as guardians of continuity allegedly began questioning one another's motives, loyalties, and long-term intentions for the crown itself, because by that stage, this was no longer simply about procedure or constitutional wording. It had become a battle over influence, authority, and the future shape of the monarchy in an era already overshadowed by fear, uncertainty, and quiet desperation. And as officials scrambled to contain the fallout, behind closed doors, another detail emerged, one that transformed concern into outright alarm. The silence from Kensington Palace was immediate. Calls stopped being returned. Staff movements changed overnight. Even longtime royal correspondents noticed something chilling in the air as, though the household itself had suddenly shifted into defensive formation. In the aftermath of Prince William's dramatic departure from the cabinet briefing, the atmosphere surrounding the Wales household reportedly transformed with astonishing speed. What had once appeared to the public as a calm and disciplined royal operation suddenly became guarded, tense, and unusually difficult to access. According to palace insiders, internal planning meetings scheduled for later that week were abruptly postponed without explanation, triggering immediate speculation among aides already alarmed by rumors surrounding the rewritten protocol amendment. One source familiar with Kensington Palace operations claimed that cancellations felt less like routine scheduling changes and more like an emergency. Containment measures designed to prevent sensitive conversations from spreading further. And then came the whispers surrounding Catherine. Reports suggest the Princess of Wales had quietly withdrawn from a major strategy discussion tied to future royal engagements. A move that stunned even seasoned palace staff, who viewed her as one of the monarchy's most reliable and composed senior figures. Various interpretations of her sudden absence began circulating almost immediately. Some insiders believed Catherine herself had become deeply unsettled by whatever details William learned during the briefing. Others feared she had been directly pulled into the constitutional debate, unfolding behind closed doors. Either way, the timing only intensified public fascination and private anxiety. By late evening, reports claim William returned to Kensington Palace visibly tense, distracted, and unusually withdrawn. Staff. Members allegedly noticed that his normally measured demeanor had shifted into something colder and more defensive, as though the future he believed was secure had suddenly become unstable beneath him. What made the situation even more unsettling was the growing security presence reportedly surrounding the Wales household in the hours that followed. According to multiple insiders, additional protection coordination was quietly introduced around key movements connected to William, Catherine, and the children. Officially, no explanation was given, but inside royal circles, the increased precautions fueled a dangerous theory that the protocol revision was not simply administrative, but potentially connected to deeper institutional fears about authority, succession, and control during a period of growing uncertainty inside the monarchy. As these rumors spread, palace insiders began whispering about what one source allegedly described as a trust fracture emerging within the institution itself. That phrase alone sent shockwaves through royal observers because the monarchy survives largely through internal discipline and carefully maintained unity. The idea that trust between senior households might be eroding behind the scenes was viewed by many as profoundly alarming. Reports suggest William increasingly viewed the rewritten protocol not as a technical adjustment, but as a direct challenge to his future authority and the long-established understanding surrounding his family's position inside the crown. And as suspicion deepened, so did the confusion over where the amendment had truly originated. Senior aides reportedly became divided between those who believed the revised clause emerged from Buckingham Palace influence and those convinced government officials themselves had initiated the change under pressure tied to contingency planning. That uncertainty created an atmosphere of paranoia, where even longtime allies allegedly began questioning one another's motives. Meanwhile, outside the palace walls, major media organizations quietly shifted into preparation mode. Royal correspondents, political editors, and constitutional analysts reportedly began coordinating potential coverage strategies, while waiting for official confirmation that never arrived. Yet the silence itself became part of the story. Every cancelled appearance, every unanswered inquiry, every delayed statement only added to the growing belief that something far more serious was unfolding. Behind closed doors than the public had been allowed to see. Because beneath the polished language of constitutional procedure and royal tradition, insiders now feared the monarchy had entered one of its most emotionally volatile internal crises in years. But while the public only saw a prince leaving a meeting early, insiders claimed the real confrontation happened hours later behind palace doors. By nightfall, what began as a procedural briefing had reportedly become one of the most volatile royal confrontations in recent memory. Behind closed doors, alliances hardened, tempers collapsed, and old fractures inside the monarchy suddenly resurfaced with dangerous force. According to insiders familiar with the unfolding crisis, the atmosphere inside royal circles had shifted from confusion to outright confrontation within a matter of hours. What alarmed palace veterans most was not simply the disagreement itself, but the speed at which trust between senior figures appeared to unravel. Reports suggest Prince William demanded immediate clarification from high-ranking royal officials shortly after returning to Kensington Palace, insisting on answers about who authorized the revised protocol and why critical elements connected to succession authority had allegedly been introduced without broader consultation. Sources close to the situation claim the discussions became emotionally charged almost immediately because, beneath the constitutional language and procedural wording, issue increasingly centered around Catherine's future role inside the monarchy. Various interpretations of the internal dispute describe a growing fear among William's allies that the Princess of Wales was being drawn into a dangerous institutional struggle over influence, contingency planning, and future control of the crown. That possibility reportedly transformed the atmosphere behind closed doors into something far more personal than political. One palace insider later described the mood as deeply unstable, claiming even experienced aides who had served through years of royal turbulence appeared shaken by the intensity of the disagreement. And perhaps most telling of all was the quiet involvement of Princess Anne. According to several royal sources, the Princess Royal was discreetly pulled into late-night consultations as tensions escalated between competing factions inside the institution. That detail alone sent shockwaves through longtime royal observers because Anne has long been viewed as one of the monarchy's most disciplined and stabilizing figures, someone rarely drawn into internal conflict unless the stakes are exceptionally serious. Reports suggest her presence signaled that senior royals themselves feared the confrontation was beginning to threaten the fragile balance holding the institution together during one of its most uncertain periods in decades. Comparisons were soon being whispered to succession tensions that emerged during the later years of Queen Elizabeth II's reign, when questions surrounding long-term continuity reportedly forced difficult conversations behind palace walls. But insiders claim this crisis felt different, more immediate, more emotionally volatile. The monarchy was no longer confronting abstract future scenarios. It was confronting the reality of uncertainty in real time, with King Charles's health struggles already placing enormous strain on relationships, responsibilities, and authority structures inside the firm. Royal aides allegedly began fearing that the rewritten protocol could permanently reshape future power balances within the monarchy, particularly regarding how influence would be exercised during periods of institutional vulnerability. According to sources familiar with William's position, the Prince of Wales interpreted the amendment not merely as procedural overreach, but as a breach of long-standing understandings that had quietly governed the transition toward his eventual reign. To William's supporters, the issue was not simply about constitutional wording. It was about trust between royal households, trust between palace officials and future heirs, trust that sensitive decisions affecting Catherine and their children would not be altered behind closed doors without transparency. As emotions intensified, discussions reportedly stretched deep into the night without resolution. Some insiders claim voices were raised. Others insist the most chilling moments came during silences, when senior figures allegedly realized how divided the institution had quietly become beneath its carefully controlled public image. Outside the palace, the public remained largely unaware of the scale of the confrontation unfolding in private. But inside royal circles, a growing number of officials reportedly feared the monarchy had crossed into dangerous territory where internal suspicion was beginning to overpower unity itself. And with every passing hour, the rewritten protocol stopped looking like a bureaucratic adjustment and started resembling something far more explosive, a struggle over the future direction of the crown during a moment of extraordinary vulnerability. Yet the deeper investigators looked into the rewritten protocol, the clearer it became that this crisis was never only about procedure. Palace historians often say the monarchy survives not through speeches or ceremonies, but through control of access, influence, timing, and succession. And according to growing whispers inside royal circles, that invisible battle may now be unfolding in full view. In the days following Prince William's abrupt departure from the cabinet briefing, investigators and royal correspondents reportedly began looking far beyond the rewritten protocol itself, searching instead for the deeper struggle hidden beneath the constitutional language. What they allegedly discovered painted a far more unsettling picture than anyone first imagined, according to sources familiar with internal palace discussions. The revised protocol was never viewed in isolation by senior royal figures. Reports suggest it was tied to broader contingency planning surrounding succession management during a period of extraordinary instability inside the monarchy. That revelation immediately shifted the narrative from bureaucratic confusion to something far more emotionally charged, a quiet battle over who would shape the crown's future if the institution entered a prolonged period of uncertainty. At the center of that growing tension stood King Charles's increasingly fragile inner circle. For months, insiders had whispered about competing influences surrounding the monarch as questions about long-term stability quietly intensified behind closed doors. Some aides allegedly favored accelerating future transition planning to ensure institutional continuity. Others reportedly feared that moving too aggressively would create the appearance of instability at the very moment the monarchy most needed public confidence. And somewhere inside that fragile divide, William and Catherine suddenly found themselves standing at the heart of a dangerous constitutional storm. Sources close to Kensington Palace claim William's supporters became deeply concerned that strategic sidelining efforts were beginning to emerge through procedural channels disguised as administrative necessity. According to these interpretations, the protocol amendment represented more than a legal adjustment. It symbolized an attempt to subtly reshape authority structures surrounding the future reign before William himself was prepared to accept them. That fear reportedly transformed existing tensions into outright distrust. What made the situation even more emotionally explosive was Catherine's growing role inside the monarchy itself. Over recent years, the Princess of Wales had increasingly become viewed not merely as a future queen consort, but as one of the institution's most stabilizing and publicly trusted figures. Royal commentators frequently described her as essential to preserving confidence in the monarchy during a period overshadowed by illness, scandal, and generational transition. And according to insiders, that rising influence may have quietly intensified internal anxieties among factions with competing visions for how the crown should evolve in the years ahead. Palace veterans now whisper about emerging divisions between those prioritizing continuity through William and Catherine's eventual leadership, and those seeking tighter centralized control during the current reign's vulnerable final chapter. The result, insiders claim, is an institution increasingly fractured by fear of the future itself. Royal commentators soon began describing the confrontation as the battle for the next reign, a phrase that sent shockwaves through both political and media circles because it implied the monarchy was no longer merely managing uncertainty, it was internally fighting over it. Within that context, William's dramatic exit from the cabinet meeting took on entirely new meaning. What initially appeared to be frustration over protocol was now interpreted by some insiders as a symbolic act of defiance against forces he believed were attempting to reshape the monarchy's future without transparency or trust. The silence that followed from all senior royals only intensified the speculation. No denials, no clarifications, no carefully staged appearances designed to calm public concern. Instead, there was only the growing weight of unanswered questions hanging over both Buckingham Palace and Kensington Palace alike. And in royal history, silence has often been the clearest sign that something far more serious is unfolding beneath the surface. Because according to whispers now spreading through government and palace circles, this was no longer simply a dispute about procedure, authority, or timing. It had become a deeply personal struggle over legacy, influence, and the future identity of the crown itself during one of the most emotionally fragile chapters the monarchy had faced in decades. But the final twist came the following morning when one unexpected decision sent shockwaves through both the government and the palace. At sunrise, senior officials reportedly expected Prince William to quietly return, resume discussions, and allow the controversy to fade behind palace walls. Instead, according to multiple royal insiders, he made a decision that stunned everyone involved. Sources familiar with the situation claim the Prince of Wales refused to participate in any further consultations until the rewritten protocol underwent a full internal review, a move that immediately transformed what had once been viewed as a contained constitutional disagreement into a public institutional crisis. For many inside both government and royal circles, the decision felt unprecedented. William was not merely questioning procedural wording anymore. According to whispers spreading rapidly through Whitehall and Kensington Palace, he was openly challenging the process through which sensitive authority structures surrounding the future monarchy had allegedly been handled behind closed doors. That single act reportedly triggered emergency consultations between senior palace figures and government representatives within hours. Multiple insiders claim frantic conversations began unfolding across private offices as officials attempted to prevent the growing confrontation from spiraling further into public view. Yet the more they tried to contain the crisis, the more unstable the atmosphere became. According to sources connected to Kensington Palace, staff members were quietly instructed to tighten internal communications immediately following William's refusal. Access to briefing materials reportedly became more restricted. Discussions were allegedly compartmentalized, and aides were warned against speaking with outside contacts as fears of escalating leaks intensified. But by then, the silence itself had already become impossible to control. Reports suggest younger royal aides inside Kensington Palace had begun rallying around William's position, viewing his reaction not as recklessness but as a defense of institutional transparency during a deeply vulnerable period for the crown. Some insiders even described a growing generational divide emerging within the royal structure itself. Veteran palace officials reportedly prioritized containment and stability above all else, while younger staff increasingly viewed secrecy and backroom maneuvering as dangerous to the monarchy's long-term credibility. That tension quietly deepened the emotional weight surrounding the crisis, because it suggested the conflict was no longer isolated to senior royals alone. It was spreading through the institution from the inside out. Meanwhile, attention increasingly turned toward Catherine. Sources. Close to the Wales household claimed the Princess of Wales had become deeply unsettled by the previous day's events, particularly after realizing how directly discussions about future constitutional authority could impact her role and the security surrounding their children. Various interpretations suggest Catherine was less concerned with public fallout than with the growing atmosphere of mistrust developing behind palace walls. According to insiders, that realization weighed heavily on William as well. For years, he and Catherine had reportedly worked to project stability, discipline, and continuity during some of the monarchy's most turbulent modern chapters. But now, that carefully maintained foundation appeared to be under threat from within the institution itself. Senior figures allegedly began warning that the confrontation could inflict lasting damage on already fragile trust structures inside the monarchy. One palace veteran reportedly described the atmosphere as institutional exhaustion colliding with institutional fear. And outside Britain, the situation was becoming increasingly difficult to contain. Media blackout efforts that initially appeared successful reportedly started collapsing as international outlets picked up fragments of the story from multiple unofficial sources. Constitutional analysts, royal commentators, and foreign correspondents began piecing together the significance of William's refusal, fueling speculation that the monarchy had entered one of its most precarious internal periods in decades. The palace's refusal to provide clarity only intensified the frenzy. Every unanswered question seemed to deepen the sense that something historically significant was unfolding beneath the carefully polished image of royal unity. Royal observers soon began warning that the confrontation might represent far more than a temporary dispute over protocol. According to growing whispers within both political and royal circles, this moment could ultimately be remembered as a turning point of fracture that exposed long-hidden tensions over power, succession, and the future direction of the crown during a period when stability mattered more than ever. And as Britain waited for answers, insiders claimed the monarchy was already entering a dangerous new phase, one no protocol could fully contain. The monarchy has survived wars, abdications, scandals, and betrayal, but insiders now fear a far quieter threat of fracture within the institution itself, where trust has begun eroding behind polished smiles and carefully staged appearances. In the tense days following Prince William's refusal to continue discussions without a full review of the rewritten protocol, reports suggest relationships between royal households became increasingly strained in ways even seasoned palace veterans found deeply unsettling. What once appeared to the public as a disciplined institution operating with unified purpose now allegedly felt divided by suspicion, caution, and competing fears about the future. According to insiders familiar with the emotional atmosphere surrounding the Wales household, William had become singularly focused on one priority above all else: protecting Catherine and their children from what he reportedly viewed as growing institutional instability behind closed doors. Sources claim the Prince of Wales no longer saw the crisis merely as a constitutional disagreement. To him, the battle had become personal. It was about safeguarding his family from decisions being shaped in secret during one of the monarchy's most uncertain chapters in generations. That determination reportedly hardened his stance even further, particularly as whispers about hidden power struggles inside the palace continued spreading through both political and royal circles. Yet amid the growing turmoil, one figure allegedly emerged as a quiet stabilizing force behind the scenes: Princess Anne. According to multiple royal insiders, the Princess Royal spent much of the escalating crisis operating privately between key households, attempting to preserve some degree of institutional cohesion before tensions spiraled beyond repair. Her involvement reportedly reassured certain senior aides who feared the monarchy was drifting toward a level of internal division not seen since some of the darkest succession anxieties during the later years of Queen Elizabeth II's reign. Comparisons to historical royal conflicts soon became unavoidable. Veteran commentators quietly reference periods in royal history when fractures over succession, authority, and influence were deliberately hidden from public view to preserve confidence in the crown. But insiders claim this moment feels uniquely dangerous because modern scrutiny makes secrecy nearly impossible to maintain. Every delayed appearance, every carefully worded statement, Every unusually tense public interaction now fuels speculation that the monarchy is struggling to contain a crisis unfolding in plain sight. Palace insiders reportedly began warning that confidence inside the firm itself had been shaken. According to one source, what frightened officials most was not the disagreement over protocol, but the growing realization that trust between senior figures had started to deteriorate beneath the surface. And once trust weakens inside a monarchy, built almost entirely on continuity, discipline, and carefully managed perception, the damage can spread faster than anyone expects. Government. Officials allegedly became increasingly anxious about the constitutional optics surrounding the confrontation as well. Some feared that prolonged silence from the palace could unintentionally create the appearance of institutional instability, at a moment when public reassurance was critically important. Others reportedly worried that if more details emerged regarding internal succession disagreements, the monarchy could face difficult questions about its future cohesion during a period already overshadowed by uncertainty surrounding King Charles's health. Meanwhile, public appearances involving senior royals began receiving unprecedented scrutiny. Every expression, every interaction, every subtle shift in body language suddenly became the subject of intense speculation from commentators searching for signs of deeper tension beneath the carefully controlled surface. Royal analysts increasingly described the atmosphere surrounding the institution as controlled chaos, a phrase that perfectly captured the growing contrast between the palace's outward composure and the emotional instability insiders claimed was spreading behind closed doors. And perhaps most unsettling of all was the sense that nobody inside the monarchy seemed entirely certain how the confrontation would end, because according to whispers now circulating through both palace and government corridors, this was no longer simply about a rewritten protocol or a disputed amendment. It was about the future balance of power, the survival of institutional trust, and the emotional fracture lines beginning to form inside the very heart of the crown itself. But the most unsettling revelation was still waiting because insiders claim this protocol battle may only be the beginning. Tonight, the official story remains painfully simple. A prince briefly exited a government briefing, but inside palace corridors, among frightened aides and whispered conversations behind closed doors, almost nobody believes that explanation anymore. What began as a sudden interruption during a supposedly routine cabinet-level discussion has now evolved into something far darker and far more emotionally charged, a crisis that many insiders believe exposed dangerous fractures quietly forming beneath the surface of the monarchy itself. According to growing whispers circulating through both Whitehall and royal households, deeper constitutional negotiations may still be unfolding behind closed doors even now, far away from public scrutiny. And that possibility has only intensified fears that the confrontation surrounding the rewritten protocol was never an isolated disagreement, but part of a much larger struggle over authority, succession, and the future direction of the crown during one of the institution's most uncertain eras in modern history. Reports suggest Prince William is increasingly being viewed inside royal circles as preparing for a far more assertive future role than many palace figures once anticipated. What shocked observers was not simply his refusal to quietly accept the revised directive, but the message that refusal appeared to send throughout the institution. According to insiders, William's actions signaled a prince no longer willing to tolerate decisions, affecting his family and future authority being shaped in secrecy without accountability. To his supporters, it was an act of protection. To critics inside the system, it was viewed as a dangerous escalation during a moment when the monarchy could least afford instability. Yet perhaps no figure now stands at the emotional center of this storm more than Catherine. Over recent years, the Princess of Wales reportedly became one of the monarchy's strongest symbols of continuity, discipline, and public trust. But insiders now claim her growing importance has also made her increasingly vulnerable to the pressures consuming the institution behind closed doors. Sources close to palace operations suggest Catherine has found herself caught between the emotional burden of protecting her family and the enormous expectations placed upon her as the monarchy's future stabilizing force. That contrasts the image of calm strength masking private uncertainty has become one of the most haunting aspects of the entire crisis. Meanwhile, the silence from Buckingham Palace and Kensington Palace continues fueling unprecedented public curiosity. No detailed explanation has emerged. No direct denial has fully calmed speculation. Instead, Every day of official silence seems to deepen the growing belief that the monarchy is carefully attempting to contain something far more serious than the public initially understood. Royal insiders now warn that additional revelations could emerge in the coming weeks, as pressure surrounding the protocol controversy continues building behind the scenes. And perhaps the most explosive question of all still remains unanswered. Who authorized the revised amendment in the first place? According to various interpretations, spreading through political and royal circles alike, that mystery has become the emotional fault line running beneath the entire confrontation. Some believe the revision reflected institutional panic during a period of uncertainty surrounding King Charles's health. Others fear it represented a deliberate attempt to quietly reshape future authority structures before William's eventual reign. Either way, the incident is now widely viewed by insiders as symbolic of a monarchy entering deeply uncertain territory, where old assumptions about unity, trust, and continuity no longer feel guaranteed. Because beyond the headlines, beyond the protocol, beyond the carefully managed public image of royal stability, this story has ultimately become about something profoundly human: fear, loyalty, legacy, and survival inside one of the world's most scrutinized institutions. It is about a future king attempting to protect his family while navigating forces larger than himself. It is about a monarchy struggling to maintain order while uncertainty quietly spreads through its foundations. And it is about the painful realization that sometimes the greatest threats to powerful institutions do not come from outside enemies, but from the silent fractures growing within. Because in the House of Windsor, the most dangerous moments are never the ones the public sees, they are the ones hidden behind closed doors, where silence itself becomes a warning. Thanks for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in the next one.